Hi, my name is Jordan. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I struggle with anger, anxiety, and control. Welcome back to the Crosstalk Cafe, everyone. Today we are taking a close look at a deeply relatable character study of Moses, focusing on those moments when we feel completely disqualified by our past. But before we get into the Word of God, Chris, I was thinking about how so many of us spend years trying to quiet our stress, but we're still fueling our minds first thing in the morning with high-octane caffeine. That's why I'm so glad to welcome our brand partner, Savorista Coffee.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I struggle with anxiety, shame, and OCD. Oh, absolutely, Jordan. Savorista hits right at the heart of the recovery lifestyle. Their founder, Kate Brown, created craft decaf and half-calf coffee out of her own story of realizing caffeine was just amplifying her stress. Her whole focus is built on less hustle and more intention. Our listeners can go to savorista.com and enter the promo code PCBC to get 25% off.
It really helps you pause and savor life instead of constantly running on high alert overdrive. And speaking of creating a calm space for mind and body, another major area where we need rest is getting actual restorative sleep. That's why we're also so grateful to welcome Cozy Earth to the cafe today.
Yes, Cozy Earth completely redefines sleep comfort with their bedding and pajamas made from premium viscose from bamboo, which naturally wicks moisture to keep hot sleepers cool and dry all night long. Thousands of five-star customer reviews call these sheets buttery soft, and they back everything with a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. Our listeners can head over to CozyEarth.com and use that exact same promo code PCBC to get an exclusive 21% off any product.
That is an incredible deal. And because we earn a commission when you use our code PCBC at checkout for other of these brands, you're directly supporting the show and the ministry here at the cafe.
Yeah.
But now, Chris, let's step completely out of commercial mode. When you read Exodus chapters 3 and 4, Moses was absolutely certain his usefulness to God had ended because of his past mistakes.
I mean, just think about that for a second. Imagine spending, 40 years in absolute isolation.
Right.
It's just wild. Convinced your life is entirely over, only for a burning bush to tell you your real work hasn't even started yet.
Yeah, it's got to be a shock to the system.
Oh, for sure. It's the terrifying reality of being called when you feel like you're at your absolute most disqualified point. If you are sitting there right now, listening to this and feeling like the worst things you have ever done are the only things that define you, well, you have to understand the sheer psychological weight of what is happening in the desert here.
Which is a heavyweight, yeah.
We are looking at a man who has had 4 decades, 14,600 days, to just sit in that unforgiving heat and replay his worst day over and over.
Wow. Yeah, when you put the math on it, 14,000 days of regret.
Exactly. And when we see this profound, life-altering encounter with the God of Israel, the very first reaction from Moses is so incredibly telling. God presents this massive rescue mission for the Israelites in Egypt, and Moses just responds by saying, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?"
Right, he goes straight to self-doubt.
Totally. He is allowing the violent mistakes of his past and the sheer crushing isolation of his current situation to entirely destroy any hope for his future.
Let's pause there and really look at the geography of that isolation, because I think it perfectly mirrors the internal landscape of someone trapped in regret.
Oh, yeah.
Moses was once a prince of Egypt. He had servants, the finest clothing, the greatest education in the known world, and an immense amount of power.
Everything at his fingertips.
Right, everything. But then he loses his temper. He entirely loses control. He strikes down an Egyptian, burying the body in the sand, just hoping he can cover up the collateral damage of his own rage.
Which never works out.
Never. The truth always surfaces. So he's found out, and he flees. He trades a palace for a wasteland. For 40 years, the only things he commands are sheep.
That's a huge drop in status.
Exactly. And the sensory shift alone is just staggering, going from the perfumes of a royal court to the dust and smell of a flock in the middle of nowhere. He has completely concluded that his story is over.
He's made his bed in the dirt, basically.
Yeah. He is completely disconnected from his people, convinced his life is basically a closed book. And I honestly think that is exactly where so many of us find ourselves when we finally drag ourselves into a recovery room or, step into a church building after a decade away.
Feeling totally worthless.
We are absolutely certain our past has terminally disqualified us. We look at the broken relationships, the bad choices, the sinful habits we could never conquer, and we think, My usefulness is completely gone. I belong out in the wasteland.
And we get incredibly comfortable in that wasteland, don't we?
We really do.
That is a tension we really need to explore here, because on one hand, acknowledging that you are entirely powerless to conquer your own sinful habits is a necessary starting point. I mean, in the recovery journey, admitting our powerlessness is step one.
Right. You have to start there.
You have to. But the danger is building a house right there in step one and refusing to ever move forward.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Moses demonstrates this fascinating, highly destructive mix of false humility and just a total lack of faith. He is essentially saying, I am nothing, therefore God can do nothing through me. We use our brokenness as an excuse to avoid responsibility.
But how do you actually distinguish between genuine humility, which is, rightly recognizing that we are powerless on our own, and the destructive false humility that Moses is showing here?
That's the big question.
Because that hits incredibly close to home for me. When I look at my own history of reacting in anger and the ways I've desperately tried to forcefully control outcomes in my life, it leaves this massive lingering wreckage.
Okay, I hear that.
When you lose your temper, you create real victims. You damage trust. And when I survey that damage, my immediate internal narrative is that I have absolutely no business stepping up to lead or to guide anyone else.
It feels like the right thing to do, to step back.
Exactly. If I blew up at my family yesterday, isn't it the right, humble thing to step down and just stay quiet? How is staying in the background a refusal of God's calling?
Well, I think that is the vital distinction right there. Genuine humility says, I cannot do this on my own, but God can do it through me.
Okay.
False humility, on the other hand, says, I cannot do this on my own, therefore it cannot be done.
Wow. Okay, that's huge.
Think about how incredibly self-centered false humility actually is, right? It keeps the focus entirely on your own flaws, your own past, your own limitations. It makes you the center of the universe.
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, when you say, I am too broken to be used, you are actually making a remarkably arrogant statement, because you are claiming that your past mistakes are more powerful than the Creator's ability to redeem them.
Ouch. Yeah, that stings, but it's true.
Moses is hiding behind his past mistakes to avoid the terrifying vulnerability of being used by God in the present. He is using his past as a shield. I mean, if he can convince God that he is useless, he never has to face Pharaoh.
He gets out of it.
Exactly. He never has to risk failing again. He can just stay safely hidden out there among the sheep.
Which is precisely why God's response to him is so brilliant and so entirely unexpected.
Oh, it's so good.
When Moses asks, "Who am I?" God completely ignores the question.
Just bypasses it entirely.
Think about that for a second. The creator of the universe is asked a direct question about identity, and he simply refuses to validate the premise. He doesn't offer a psychological evaluation. He doesn't pull out a list of Moses's good qualities to boost his self-esteem,
Right, no pros and cons list.
No, he doesn't say, well, you're actually a very dedicated shepherd and you have great leadership potential. God just points directly to the future and promises his own presence.
I will be with you.
Yes. He simply says, I will be with you. And then he gives this promise, saying that the sign will be that they will worship God on this very mountain after bringing the people out of Egypt. God shifts the entire focal point. It is no longer about who Moses is. It is entirely about who God is.
It is the ultimate overriding of an identity crisis. The best way I can describe this dynamic is thinking about a child who has just made a massive, chaotic mess.
Okay.
Let's say they smashed a really expensive ceramic vase, something they were explicitly told not to touch.
Oh, no.
Right. The child is sitting in the middle of the shattered pieces, overwhelmed with guilt, just sobbing and repeating, I'm a bad kid, I'm a bad kid.
Breaking your heart, yeah.
Now, what does a truly loving, grounded parent do in that exact moment? The parent doesn't argue with the statement. The parent doesn't pull out a chart and say, no, look here, yesterday you shared your toy, so mathematically you are a good kid.
Right, because that's just negotiating their worth.
Exactly. Arguing about the child's resume validates the idea that their identity is based on their performance. Instead, the parent ignores the resume entirely. The parent simply sits down right next to them on the floor, right in the middle of the broken pieces, and says, I am sitting right here with you until we fix this.
Wow.
The parent's physical presence completely overrides the child's self-condemnation.
That is exactly what is happening in the desert. God is looking at Moses, who is completely surrounded by the shattered pieces of his own life, and saying, your identity is no longer defined by your worst mistake. It is defined by my presence with you.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you feel defined by your worst moments, hear this clearly. God is not interested in debating your past. He's interested in occupying your present.
I love that.
And this is a massive paradigm shift for anyone walking a path of recovery. We so often think that the ultimate goal of our healing is just to stop doing the bad thing.
Yes, just to get through the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We think the goal is just to manage our anger, or quiet our anxiety, or stay sober from whatever substance was destroying us, just so we can survive. But surviving is not the finish line. Recovery is a pathway to fulfilling a much larger divine purpose.
It's just the beginning.
Yes, the wreckage of our past proves definitively that we are weak on our own. But that weakness does not restrict your future potential in a divine plan. You are not being freed from your past just to sit quietly in a room. You're being freed to participate in a rescue mission.
And God anchors that rescue mission entirely in his own unshakable nature. After refocusing Moses away from his insecurities, God declares his own identity. He says, I am W-H-I-M.
So powerful.
It really is. He tells Moses to go to the Israelites and say, I am has sent me to you. This isn't just a name. It is a declaration of absolute self-existent reality. God is saying, I do not depend on anything else to exist. I am not created. I am not sustained by external forces. And I am certainly not bound by your past failures or your current limitations. When your anxiety tells you that your future is fragile, God is announcing that he is the eternal constant.
And he immediately connects that eternal constant to the reality of human history. He reminds Moses that he is the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
He's showing his track record.
Exactly. He's providing a track record of generational faithfulness.
Yeah.
And then God lays out this incredibly detailed, breathtaking promise. He promises to watch over them, to strike the Egyptians with wonders, and to lead the Israelites out of misery and into a land flowing with milk and honey.
A total rescue.
Right. He even promises that they won't leave empty-handed, but will plunder the wealth of their oppressors. God is painting a picture of complete liberation and abundant blessing. He's showing Moses a future so massive, so detailed, and so victorious that it should entirely eclipse any lingering shadow of self-doubt.
It absolutely should, logically.
Logically, yeah.
If the creator of the universe gives you a detailed itinerary of victory, logic dictates you start marching.
You'd think so.
But human fear, especially fear rooted in decades of shame, is rarely logical. Because even after hearing this incredible promise of deliverance, Moses remains firmly stuck in his own head.
Classic overthinking.
Totally. He answers God by saying, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? He is projecting his own internal insecurities onto the elders of Israel.
Aye.
He is convinced that because he secretly does not believe in his own worth, no one else will ever believe in him either. He assumes his own self-loathing is contagious.
Which brings us to one of the most physically visceral moments in this entire narrative.
Yeah.
God knows Moses needs something tangible, something he can see and touch to break through that mental loop of doubt.
Something real.
Right. So God asks him a very simple question. What is that in your hand? And Moses replies, a staff. Then the Lord commands him, throw it on the ground.
Just drop it.
Now, we can't just skip past this. We have to really analyze what is happening here, especially for those of us who struggle deeply with the need to control our environments. Think about what a shepherd's staff actually represented for a man who had lived in the wilderness for 40 years.
He wasn't just a walking stick?
No, it wasn't just a piece of wood. It was his livelihood. It was his physical support on treacherous, uneven terrain. It was his weapon against wolves and predators.
It's his security.
It was the instrument he used to guide and direct the only things he had any authority over. Ultimately, the staff represented his complete control over his small, isolated environment. It was the one thing he could grip tightly in his hand to feel a sense of security and power.
It was his entire coping mechanism. It was his independence.
Exactly that. And God says, throw it on the ground. God demands that Moses physically release the very thing he relies on to feel safe.
He has to let go.
Moses has to unclench his fist. He has to let go of his control to actually see God's power. And honestly, this right here is the daily, grueling, unglamorous work of my own recovery.
Yeah, it's not easy.
I have to intentionally, repeatedly throw down my pride. I have to throw down my absolute desperate need to control the people and the circumstances around me. Because when I grip my anger, I am usually just gripping a desire for control.
That makes a lot of sense.
I get angry because things aren't going exactly how I planned, and I'm terrified of what happens if I am not managing every single detail. Anger is my staff.
Wow.
It makes me feel powerful when I actually feel deeply insecure, but God doesn't require a flawless track record from us to use us. What he requires is obedience. He requires us to open our hands and let go of whatever we are leaning on instead of him.
Yes, but let's be entirely honest about what actually happens when you open your hand, because it's crucial not to romanticize this process.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds so poetic to say, just surrender your control. But look at the scripture here. When Moses throws the staff down, it becomes a snake. And what does Moses do? He literally runs from it.
He runs away.
Releasing control is absolutely terrifying. When you finally open your hands and say, okay, God, I surrender my coping mechanisms. I surrender my need to micromanage the situation. I surrender my eating disorder. I surrender my addiction. Things do not instantly become peaceful.
No, they don't.
Often they get very scary very quickly. It feels incredibly dangerous. You surrender control, and suddenly you are face to face with all the raw emotions, the past traumas, the deep-seated fears that your control was actively masking. The illusion of safety evaporates, and you are staring at a living, chaotic threat. You are facing a snake.
That is such a profoundly necessary truth to name. The fear of surrender is visceral. When you drop the illusion of control, the reality of your vulnerability feels like a direct threat to your survival.
Right.
Your instinct is to run away, to grab the nearest distraction, or try and take control back immediately. But notice that God doesn't let Moses just run away.
No, he calls him back.
He gives another command that is honestly even more terrifying than the first. Reach out your hand and take it by the tail.
Which is wild.
Catching a venomous snake by the tail is the absolute most dangerous way to handle it. You are supposed to pin the head so it can't strike you. Grabbing the tail leaves you entirely exposed.
Totally vulnerable.
God is commanding Moses to directly engage with his fear, but to do it in a posture of complete vulnerability and obedience. And when Moses obeys, when he reaches out into the danger, the chaos solidifies. It turns back into a staff in his hand. But here is the critical shift. It is no longer just his ordinary shepherd's staff.
Right, it changes entirely.
From this moment on, it is referred to as the staff of God. What was once a tool of human control has been transformed through surrender into an instrument of divine authority.
And God continues to demonstrate that his authority covers every single aspect of human vulnerability. He doesn't stop with the snake. He tells Moses to put his hand inside his cloak, and when he pulls it out, the skin is leprous white as snow.
Another terrifying moment.
Yeah, because in that culture, leprosy was the ultimate incurable sentence of absolute isolation. It meant you were cut off from society forever.
A death sentence, really.
Then God has him put the hand back into his cloak, and when he pulls it out, the skin is entirely restored, completely healthy. He even promises that if the elders still do not believe these first two signs, Moses is to pour water from the Nile onto dry ground, and it will become blood. God is systematically proving his absolute authority over nature, over disease, over the very lifeblood of the Egyptian empire. He is dismantling every possible reason for fear.
You would genuinely think that seeing a piece of dead wood turn into a living serpent and seeing your own flesh become diseased and then miraculously healed in an instant would permanently cure anyone of their self-doubt.
I would hope so.
You'd think Moses would be charging down that mountain, staff in hand, absolutely ready to kick down the doors of Pharaoh's palace right then and there.
You would certainly think so, but that just shows how deeply paralyzing shame truly is.
Yeah, runs deep.
Shame creates this profound, stubborn distortion in how we view ourselves and how we view the Creator. Despite witnessing literal miracles, despite holding the undeniable proof of God's power in his very own hands, Moses continues to argue.
He just won't give up.
He falls back on yet another perceived inadequacy. He says, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." He is desperately searching the bottom of the barrel for any excuse to avoid the calling.
And God responds with this magnificent rhetorical question, reminding Moses of who the designer actually is. The Lord says, "Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say."
It's so direct.
God is essentially saying, I designed the instrument. I am fully aware of its limitations. You are not telling me anything I do not already know, and I am the one who will play the tune.
But Moses still refuses. After all of that patience, after the promises, after the miracles, after the direct assurance of help, Moses just breaks down and begs, "Pardon your servant, Lord, please send someone else." And when I read those specific words, I feel them physically in my chest. I deeply, intimately understand the sheer panic of begging God to just send someone else.
I know you've wrestled with that.
Yeah, my daily struggles with anxiety and OCD constantly create this loud, persistent, looping narrative in my head that I am entirely too flawed to be of any real use to anyone. OCD is a relentless thief. It will latch onto any past mistake, any intrusive thought, any slight imperfection, and spin it into a massive web of absolute disqualification.
Just magnifies everything.
It tries to convince me that if I dare to step out in faith, if I dare to lead or speak or care for someone, I will inevitably ruin everything. The anxiety tells you that your limitations are permanent roadblocks rather than spaces for grace to operate.
It's a form of mental and spiritual paralysis that convinces you that staying hidden is the only safe option for you and for everyone around you. You believe you're doing God a favor by staying out of the way.
Yes. Shame convinces us to stay quiet under the guise of being responsible. When I feel slow of speech because my shame has convinced me that my voice doesn't matter or that my intrusive thoughts make me a hypocrite, I assume that God simply made a clerical error in choosing me.
Right. Like he picked the wrong file.
And when you look at Moses in this moment, the tragedy is absolutely staggering. He is looking the very creator of the mouth right in the face, hearing a direct, undeniable promise of divine assistance, and he still says, I can't speak.
It's hard to read.
We do the exact same thing when we are called to step up, maybe to share our testimony in front of a group, or to lead a recovery circle, or just to pull a struggling friend aside and encourage them. We look at the God who knit us together in our mother's womb, who knows every cell in our bodies, and we say, you picked the wrong person. Please, let me just retreat into the shadows where I cannot do any damage.
We want to stay safely in the back row. We want to remain completely invisible, because being visible means being vulnerable. And being vulnerable means we might fail, or we might be rejected. We start to actually believe that our flaws are louder than God's calling. And what is so incredible about this narrative is seeing exactly how God responds to this absolute, stubborn, fearful refusal. The record says, then the Lord's anger burned against Moses.
And finally gets mad.
I mean, we really have to pause there because God is rightfully angry. Moses is directly insulting the Creator by calling the creation inadequate, and he is blatantly refusing a direct, repeated command. But notice carefully what God's anger actually produces. It doesn't produce a lightning bolt. It doesn't produce a curse.
This is where the story shifts so beautifully for us and where the grace becomes tangible. Because God's response to Moses' fear and even his response to Moses' stubborn refusal is not abandonment. His response is provision.
Provision, yeah.
God says, what about your brother, Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do.
This is the absolute crux of the connection to our recovery journeys.
It really is. God does not demand that we suddenly become perfectly courageous, fully healed, and brilliantly eloquent all on our own before we can be used. He provides an Aaron.
He brings someone alongside us to physically share the heavy burden of obedience.
Exactly. When my anxiety is screaming that I absolutely cannot do it, and my shame is aggressively stealing my words, God's answer is to place safe, understanding sponsors, mentors, and friends directly in my path.
Thank God for them.
Right. He brings people who can speak the truth over me when I cannot find the breath to speak it over myself. The reality of recovery proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we are never, ever meant to face our calling or our healing in isolation.
And that reality challenges me to my very core, because my natural defensive inclination, born entirely out of my struggle with pride, is to completely isolate myself.
That's your go-to move.
It is. I hate asking for help. It makes me feel weak. I want to figure it out on my own, fix my own problems quietly, and only present myself to the world when I am perfectly polished and put together.
The lone wolf mentality.
Exactly. But the provision of Aaron shows me that isolating myself is never part of God's perfect plan. The fact that God specifically arranged for Aaron to be already on his way to meet Moses proves that community isn't just a nice optional add-on for those who happen to be extroverts. Community is absolutely mandatory for spiritual survival and for carrying out any divine assignment.
We literally cannot fulfill our purpose without the specific people God sends to walk alongside us. The burden is designed to be too heavy for one person.
Think about it like being part of a massive choir. Imagine you're standing there singing a highly complex, demanding piece of music. You are pouring your heart out, holding a long, difficult note, and suddenly your voice just gives out.
You just run out of air.
Your lungs burn. You hit a physical wall. You are weary, you are drained, and your throat is completely worn out. If you are standing alone on a stage singing a solo, the song dies the second you run out of breath.
Everyone hears it stop.
The silence is obvious and deafening. But in a choir, The person standing right next to you takes a deep breath and hits the exact same note you can't reach. They stagger their breathing with yours. They sustain the song, keeping the melody alive and strong until you can catch your breath, recover your strength, and join back in.
That is such a good picture of it.
That is exactly what an Aaron does in our lives. They carry the note when our voice is entirely gone. They share the weight of the calling so that the work of God continues seamlessly, even in our moments of total, embarrassing weakness.
And this tangible provision of community is the ultimate turning point for Moses. It is the thing that finally tips the scales and moves him from paralysis to action. Because God provided a brother to physically share the burden, Moses finally chooses to trust God enough to take the next terrifying step.
He actually moves forward.
We see this incredible sequence of events unfold. The Lord speaks to Aaron and sends him into the wilderness to meet Moses. They meet at the mountain of God, they embrace, and Moses shares absolutely everything with Aaron. He tells him the words the Lord had spoken, and he shows him all the miraculous signs.
That takes courage to share all that.
It does. And then together, as a team, they bring the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron speaks the words and performs the signs.
The entire dynamic of Moses' life shifts from total silent isolation in the desert to a shared vocal mission among the people. But it required Moses to take a massive risk.
A huge risk.
Because Moses chose to believe the promise and actually share his wild, unbelievable encounter with Aaron, the outcome was incredibly powerful. Step one was simply stepping out of his own isolation. He had to verbally share his experience, his calling, and even his fears. And the result of that vulnerability is recorded so clearly for us. And they believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped.
It gives me absolute chills every single time I think about that sequence. Because Moses, sharing his experience, even with his hesitant, halting, deeply flawed faith, ignited a massive, unstoppable fire of belief in others.
Yeah, it was contagious in the best way.
Think about the condition of the Israelites at this moment. They were suffering in brutal multi-generational slavery. Their circumstances hadn't changed yet. The whips were still cracking. The labor was still backbreaking.
They were still in it.
But when they heard that the Lord had seen their misery, that he had paid attention to their suffering, their immediate, visceral response was to bow down and worship right there in the dirt.
And this translates so directly to our lives today, right now. When you choose to step out of your own isolation, when you sit together with others week by week in a recovery room, when you commit to fellowship and honest conversation instead of hiding in your home, your understanding of God continues to grow exponentially.
You see him working in others.
You begin to look around the room and recognize the specific people he has intentionally sent to assist you along the way, your own personal errands. You realize that your survival depends on their voices, and their survival depends on yours.
And the beautiful, undeniable ripple effect is that as we share our own halting, imperfect stories of how God is working in our messy lives, we help convince others that God notices their pain too.
That is so true.
We become the living proof to someone else that God deeply cares for them. Your willingness to stand up and say, I struggle deeply with this, I fail at this, but God is faithful anyway, is the very thing that helps someone else bow down and worship instead of giving up in total despair. Your shared weakness is the vehicle for someone else's hope.
That is the absolute power of shared testimony. It shatters the illusion that we are suffering alone. We warmly invite you to step out of your isolation, to find your Aaron, and join us this coming Friday night at Peters Creek Baptist Church in South Park, Pennsylvania.
We would love to see you there.
The evening begins at 6:30 p.m. with large group worship, followed by small groups at 7:30 p.m. and the Crosstalk Cafe at 8:30 p.m.
You can find a group near you by visiting crlocator.com. You can also reach out directly to our leadership team by emailing Craig Amstone at craig.amstone@gmail.com or contacting the church office at info@pcbc.church. We are here to help you find your community.
As we wrap up our time at the cafe today, we want to leave you with this one vital question to ponder throughout your week. If God met Moses' deepest insecurities not with a pep talk, but with the physical presence of a brother who is the Aaron in your life right now that God is trying to use to break through your isolation, and more importantly, whose Aaron are you called to be?